Hi, my name is Morris Cohen. I'm an assistant professor here in ECE, and I have twice now flipped my ECE 3025 class, which is electromagnetics. This is traditionally a very difficult class with a lot of material, a lot of math, and doesn't have always the best reputation with students. So coming in, I wanted to find a different approach to this. And when I heard about the flipped classroom and some of the interesting things that were going on, even prior to my arrival here at Georgia Tech, I knew it was something that I wanted to try. So the idea of the flipped classroom is to take the material that's often done in lectures, which is usually very basic familiarization with the content, and put that outside the classroom, have the students do that beforehand, and they come into classroom with at least a basic understanding of the material, and that's critical. But for me, I'm very interested in what you do with your in-class time, what activities maximize the productivity of that time. And before coming to Georgia Tech, I heard about a system called peer-based learning or team-based learning, in which you would basically divide the class up into small groups and have them work on problems. You could do this with homework-style problems where they're very long and they're basically doing their homeworks in class. But for me, that felt incomplete. It felt like you were doing the same things and I wanted something different. And the idea is that most of the questions you ask are essentially in two stages. So what my students do is they come to class equipped with a clicker, an electronic clicker. And what I do is over the course of the class, I'll ask a series of questions, and the students will answer the questions twice. First, they'll think about the question, and they'll buzz in with their answers in the clicker, just entirely on their own. These questions are deliberately chosen to be very conceptual. They're always multiple choice. It doesn't require a lot of calculations, but it does very much challenge their conceptual thinking with these questions. They're not just plug and chug type problems at all. And I designed the questions intentionally to be difficult, and I aim for about half the class to get it right on the first try. That to me is the mark of a good question. Once the students have answered this question, I look at the results on my screen, and assuming that the fair fraction of the class hasn't gotten it right, I then flip it and I say to the class, okay, now everyone get into groups of 4 and discuss, and you have to reach a consensus answer. Now the students don't see when they begin this what the distribution is. They don't know whether people have answered A more commonly or C more commonly. But in those first few minutes, as they're coming up with their own answer, they're also formulating a framework in their mind of how exactly they answer the question and what their explanation is. And they get it in that process. They get sort of emotionally attached to the problem. And I think that serves well, because as soon as I say to them, okay, go ahead and discuss this in groups, the class really lights up. And there's a really dynamic, exciting environment as they start sort of arguing it out, and one person says, well, I think it's A because of this, and someone says, well, but if you think about this, then that actually suggests it's B. And this is an incredible process that can go on for maybe about 10 minutes. As they're doing this, I roam around the classroom, I kind of listen into the discussion. I'll buzz in when I see a group kind of quieting down and struggling a little bit. After about 10, maybe 15 minutes of discussion, when I sense that it's quieting down, I'll bring everyone back to the front. I'll say, okay, everyone please re-vote, and then they'll all re-vote. And then I'll show the answers that the entire class showed. And what's amazing is that almost every time I do this, the percentage that get it right goes way up. Oftentimes, in the first round, only about 30% or even less will get it right. But amazingly, through the power of that group discussion, they're able to convince their peers that they're correct. And so oftentimes you'll get 30% that got it right in the first try, but after that group discussion, 80 to 100% will get it right. Beyond that point, I then take a few minutes on the board and I explain why one answer is correct and why the others aren't. And I think because of that sort of investment, that intellectual investment that they make in that process, they're also engaged in that explanation. And they ask questions, well, I thought it was B because of this doesn't make sense to me, and I feel like I really interact with the students in a way that I wouldn't if it were just a lecture, and I think that's an exciting aspect as well. There's a byproduct of all this, which is as they become more comfortable with each other, they also become more comfortable with me as I roam around and sort of inject myself into these discussions. And I think that sort of helps break down the barriers that make students less comfortable with professors. The professor becomes more approachable when students have that sort of, more comfortable interaction. And I think that's a nice byproduct of this concept. The group size also matters a lot. I find that 4 is kind of just the right number, maybe sometimes 5. If it's more than 4 or 5, I'll often see them fragmenting. A group of 6 will often just naturally split up into 2 groups of 3, and they aren't really talking. In a group of 2 or 3, they'll often get stuck too easily. They may not quite have the critical mass there to have enough new ideas into that. So the very important aspects of this 2-stage process is ask tough questions that a fair fraction of the class is going to get right, and ask conceptual questions that they can commit to intellectually. And beyond that, just let the class debate. Let the discussion go. I mean, just have fun. It's really, it's also a lot of fun to teach like this and to watch that process happening. And it's something that I've really enjoyed watching and being a part of as well.